I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by an economic analyst, Mr. Wale Oluwo. Thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Nice to have me here. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, implementation was the catchphrase of the 2012 budget and the subject of much controversy. And now we see that the unutilized funds from that budget are to be rolled over into 2013. Is this a healthy way of doing it, and what effect does it have on the economy?
I think it's a smart thing to do, because if you remember the 2012 budget, we were supposed to end it by March 2013. But we don't have that luxury of time. And I like the fact that it has been rolled into it. And that, in a way, will enable us to have a capital side of the budget that is a little better than what it should have been had it been we didn't do this rollover. Having said that, with regards to implementation, I think the challenge we had in 2012 was the fact that we had a huge subsidy in the budget, and we had even overspent what was budgeted for 2012. That is on one hand. On the other hand, in 2012 too, within the macroeconomic framework, the monetary policy drivers had put a lot of premium on controlling inflation, and that paranoia about inflation has made the interest rate to go very high. So for 2013 budget, my suggestion would be that we should move away from pursuing a single-digit inflation and move to pursuing a single-digit interest rate, because that is the only way the private sector can have access to the kind of funds that they will need to increase capacity, to increase production, and also to be able to generate employment. Mind you, the power sector is gradually, getting improved, and then you need to complement it with access to funds for the private sector to work. Now, in 2012, we also had a big problem. And the problem was that the banks had a field day. They were practically making money for doing little or nothing. Because the federal government instruments, those were the bonds and the fixed income instruments that had no risk at all, the banks and investors were getting double-digit returns. And that crowded out the private sector market. Private sector could not get money from the equities market. They could not get money from the fixed income market because rates were high, and also in the money market because rates were high. So we should begin to trend rates down. And the MPC has a responsibility from their first meeting in first quarter of next year to bring down rates and begin to trend it downwards.
Okay, let's look at some of the other finer details of the budget. Looking at, for instance, the benchmark oil rate. The benchmark rate that was given in 2012 was hotly debated. Was that the right amount? For now, we're looking at it at $79 per barrel. Would you say that's a feasible, projection on which to peg the budget?
I believe so. In fact, when the debate started, I had pitched my tent with $82 to a barrel. And the reason is this. Number one, we know that the global demand for oil will be a little slack in 2013. But one thing is almost certain, because the federal government is under budgeting. The federal government will exceed its revenue target in 2013. That is clear. Now, exceeding the revenue target is not our major issue. Our major issue is what happens after that. A lot of this money goes into the excess crude account, and some of them will find their way into the sovereign wealth fund. Now, the issue is this. If you have money in excess crude account, we're using it to subsidize petroleum products, they share it amongst the states, and it does not come through the regular budgeting system. And what does it do? It also creates a deficit challenge, because on one hand, we are putting money in excess crude and sovereign wealth fund, and on the other hand, we are going to the local bond market to borrow money to finance a deficit that should not have been there in the first place.
I was even going to take you up on that. On the issue of borrowing, let's look at our debt servicing figure. We have 591.7 billion naira as the figure for debt servicing, with domestic debt running into trillions. How are they going to manage that?
That figure is too high. And you know why? It's because we have been financing our deficits using the local bond market. And that has taken rates to double digits. The federal government is a sovereign entity. The federal government can finance its budget deficits from borrowing from outside in dollars. And it will not be exposed to the foreign exchange risk, because the revenue of the federal government comes from crude oil, and it is denominated in dollars. So there's no foreign exchange risk. I think in 2013, and I'm advising, the federal government should make it a policy to go and source money from outside. Number one, the interest rates will be cheaper. Number two, they can refinance existing local debts. and then free the local bond market for the private sector to have access and be able to raise money at cheaper rates and at better terms, because these are long-term monies that can help private sector to increase their activity.
Okay, finally now, the total budget was increased by about 63 billion naira. Do you see this final figure, if it is a final figure, do you see this as a workable, feasible budget for us in 2013?
Honestly, this is 3 billion naira is not a very significant figure relative to the total size of the budget. For me, I think we are still under budgeting. We should be able to budget something more than that 4.3 trillion. But the challenge is the fact that the recurrent expenditure is almost like 60-something%, while the capital is about 30-something%. One thing is clear, we are going to achieve 100% implementation on the recurrent, because you got to pay salaries, allowances, and the rest of them. But if revenues are not coming as expected, it is the capital budget that will be slowed down or cut in order to meet budget figures.